Hi, welcome to this episode of Faith and Logic. In this episode of Faith and Logic, we are going to discuss about the time that Jesus came. The Bible calls it was the fullness of time when God sent his son into this world. So why was it a perfect time for Jesus to come in the first century during the Roman Empire? We are going to discuss that in this video. We are going to talk about the five enigmas that says why it was the perfect time historically, prophetically, and socially, why it was the perfect time for Jesus to come in the first century. So let's just begin this video by talking about the fullness of time. In the book of Galatians, chapter 4, verse 4 and 5, talks about this phrase, the fullness of time. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, that we might receive the adoption as sons. So here Paul talks about when the fullness of time had come, God sent his son. He's talking about Jesus, that he incarnated, being God, the eternal Son. He came into this world. He added on the humanity and human nature, and he entered into his own creation, the world that he created. He entered into the human history in the fullness of time. So it was the perfect time for Jesus to come. And we are going to see in this video why it was the perfect time for Jesus to come by talking about the five enigmas and the five historical, cultural, and prophetic conditions that made the first century the perfect moment for coming of Jesus. The five enigmas are the Roman road system, the universal language, which was the Koine Greek at the time of Jesus, urban civilization, Pax Romana, that is the peace in Rome, and Daniel's prophecy of 70 weeks. So let's just begin by the first one, the Roman road system. Roman built an advanced interconnected road network that tied together Europe, North Africa, and the Near East. This was a road system for about 300,000 kilometers. So that enabled the rapid movement of people, ideas, and of official communication. Now, the reason why they built the road system is to bring the taxes in to Rome and also to mobilize their military into the different parts of the world. So for that reason, the road system was required. And by the time Jesus came, the road systems were already there. So God used these roads so the message about Jesus could move quickly and reliably from a tiny province of Judea to the heart of the empire, the infrastructure that was prepared for the gospel to spread. Paul's missionary journeys in Acts, it assumes that this infrastructure was already there. He can move from city to city. For example, he went to Philippi, Thessalonica, Corinth, Ephesus, Rome, and he wrote letters to all these churches in different places in Asia Minor. The road system was very helpful for the spread of the gospel, using the same paved arteries that moved Roman armies and imperial mail. The gospel was spread out quickly because the road system was there, made by the Romans. So persecution didn't stop the church. When the Christians were persecuted in Rome, they fled into different parts of Asia Minor and new regions. So it simply pushed Christians along the same roads into the new regions, carrying the gospel with them. So at just the right time, I would say, God allowed Rome to pave the ancient world, and those same roads that carried Caesar's legions would soon carry Christ's apostles. In Galatians 4:4, the fullness of time included a road system perfectly suited for the gospel mission. So that's our first reason why it was the perfect time for Jesus to come into this world, because of the Romans' road system. Let's look at the next one, which is the universal language. As discussed during the time of Jesus, Koine Greek was the universal language of Roman Empire. Before Romans came, Greek was the big empire, and Alexander the Great, he conquered pretty much most of the known part of the world, and Alexander's conquest created linguistic unity. Koine Greek became the common language. Old Testament, which is written primarily in Hebrew, which was already translated during the time of Alexander the Great, and which we called as Septuagint. So Old Testament Septuagint already existed in Greek, making messianic prophecy accessible, because during the time of Alexander the Great, the Jews were Hellenized, and they were already reading the Old Testament in Greek. So the New Testament authors wrote in Koine Greek, so the message would be universally readable. A shared language plus growing system of writing, copying, and education that helped gospel to spread, to write the gospel and the letters, because writing and copying and education was at its peak during the first century. So the missionaries could walk into a synagogue and marketplace in Asia Minor, Greece, Italy, and preach Christ in the same everyday Greek most people understood. So most people, because there was a universal language, Greek, that most people spoke and read, and it was written language during the time of Jesus, it was easier for the missionaries to spread the gospel message quickly, and people were able to understand because of the universal Greek language. So in the fullness of time, God just didn't prepare the road system for the gospel to spread, but He prepared the language, the universal Koine Greek language. The words Jesus is Lord could be understood across three continents without a translator. So people did not needed a translator to translate it, because that was the universal language. Now let's look at the third reason: urban civilization. So the Greco-Roman world highly urbanized. Places like Rome, Corinth, Ephesus, Antioch, Alexandria, these are the cities where the religion and commerce and literacy and philosophy that was thriving in this part. Greco-Roman urban life had created hubs where new ideas could spread rapidly, where people were hungry for answers about meaning, morality, and God. We see in Acts chapter 17 when Paul was in Athens on the Mars Hill, and people were eager to hear what Paul had to say. Even in Berea, people wanted to see what this babbler, they called Paul babbler, what he has to say, because they were already had their Epicureans and Stoic philosophers in that time, because the Greeks, they were more into the philosophy, and the Romans adopted the same philosophy, and there were historians in Rome. So this place was thriving during the time of Romans in terms of religion and commerce and literacy and philosophy. Paul's missionary pattern targeted many cities, urban centers. They multiplied in impact. So Paul's strategy in Acts, as we see, he first targets the urban cities like Philippi, Thessalonica, Corinth, Ephesus, Rome. He plants churches there and let the gospel radiate out along the trade and family network in the countryside. So it started from the city, and then it spread quickly in the villages and in the countryside. So cities hosted a synagogue and large Jewish diaspora community. They were the perfect audience who already believed that there is one true God, and they knew the Old Testament scripture that pointed to the Messiah. So it was easier for these missionaries in the first century to evangelize and to spread the gospel because of the urban civilization. So urban density allowed the Christianity to spread exponentially through social networks. By the time of Jesus, the world was no longer scattering of isolated villages. It was a web of bustling cities. In the fullness of time, God placed the church in the intersections of empire, where one sermon in a city would ripple out to the ends of the earth. In this urban environments, Christianity could quickly become visible and influential, even though it started with a small house churches. So the urban civilization played its role in the spread of the gospel. Now let's look at the fourth one, Pax Romana. There was peace in Rome. starting 27 BC to AD 180, Roman peace under Augustus and his successors. We see that there was less war. The empire was at peace during this time period when Jesus came. So people were focusing more on sharing the ideas rather than waging wars among each other. So the empire unified under one legal military and economic system. There was safe travel, fewer wars, stable borders, ideal for message transmission. Peace was rare, as we have seen throughout the history in the old time. God timed Jesus' arrival perfectly, where there was Pax Romana, peace established by the Roman Empire. Roman citizenship laws even protected the early Christian evangelists like Paul, who was a Roman citizen himself. So he could appeal to Caesar. He invoked his Roman citizenship and used the legal system and sometimes even Roman soldier to reach the new places with the gospel, as we read in Acts chapter 21 to 28. At very moment when Rome finally silenced the constant noise of war, God sent the true Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ, into this world. In the fullness of time, peace created the lens of safety so the gospel of peace could travel freely. So this is how the Pax Romana helped in the spread of the gospel in the first century. And the last one is Daniel's prophecy of 70 week. As we all know that Daniel, in his book, Daniel chapter 9, verse 24 to 27, when you read that, predicted the precise timetable for the Messiah's appearance, perhaps the greatest Old Testament prophecy of all time, using Xerxes' decree in 69 weeks point towards Jesus' ministry era. History wasn't just accidentally aligned, but God put a date stamp in advance. When Jesus appeared during the height of Roman power on Roman roads in the age of Greek language and Roman peace, he did so on a schedule that had been revealed centuries earlier through God's prophet Daniel. Many Jews of the first century, they were already expecting Messiah based on this Daniel's prophecy. Jesus arrives exactly on the schedule, fulfilling the prophetic views of its climate. So the fullness of time was not only political and cultural, but was prophetic. Daniel had already sketched the timetable when Jesus rode into Jerusalem. He wasn't early or late. He arrived exactly on the time, exact week the scripture has pointed towards. This chart will help you understand. In Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar saw the vision and Daniel interpreted that and he predicted the next empire that will come. The first one was Babylon, followed by Medo-Persia, followed by Greece. And by the time Jesus came into the world, Rome was the great empire. And he exactly predicted 70 weeks. Most of the theologians believe this year to be 444 BC, when Xerxes decreed to rebuild Jerusalem, when he gave an order for the Jews to go and rebuild the Jerusalem. From that time onwards, 70 weeks, the 69 weeks, 483 years completed. That is somewhere around 33 AD when Christ rides into Jerusalem. And then he was crucified, rejected, and buried, and resurrected, and ascended to the heaven. And from there on, the prophetic clock is stopped, but it will again start ticking after once the church is raptured. This is a pre-tribulation rapture view where the rapture occurs before the tribulation, and then the 7 year period of tribulation, 1 week. So that final 70th week, that would be the great tribulation, as mentioned by Jesus. And also we read in the book of Revelation, which is also called Jacob's trouble, in Jeremiah chapter 30. And then the Christ second coming will happen, and then there will be a millennial reign of Jesus Christ, the 1,000 years reign of Jesus. This chart will help you understand the Daniel 70 week prophecy. We can also see here that the first 49 years of the 69-week prophecy, the 7 weeks, so 7 into 7, 49 years. That is from the time of the command of King Xerxes to rebuild Jerusalem, as we read in Daniel chapter 9, verse 25. So that was 7 weeks. And from there on, the 62 weeks, which is 434 years, the Messiah, as Daniel prophesied, the prince will be cut off. Jerusalem will be trampled, the abomination of desolation that will take place as per the prophecy of Daniel, Daniel chapter 9, verse 26. So those are the 69 weeks. And then there will be a time of Gentile, the present church age. This is a prophetic gap. And then the clock will again start ticking after the rapture. That will be the Daniel 70th week, the final 1 week, which is the 7 years. And then at the end of the tribulation, the glorious appearing of Jesus Christ. That would be the second coming of Jesus Christ. So that is Daniel's 70-week prophecy that exactly fulfilled during the time of Jesus. People were waiting for their Messiah. Not only the cultural and social and language and Roman road system played a role, but Daniel's prophecy, the prophetically also, it was the perfect time for Messiah to come into this world. So let's just conclude what we have seen in this video. No other moment in ancient history was better suited for the life, death, and global impact of Jesus than the one God chose. The road system, the world was physically connected through the road system. Language, universal language, the world was linguistically connected. The cities, the urbanization, the world was socially connected. Pax Romana, peace in Rome, the world was politically stabilized. There was peace in Rome. Daniel's 70-week prophecy, God's people were prophetically primed. They were waiting for the Messiah to come into this world. So I hope this episode has helped you understanding this 5 reasons why it was the perfect time for Jesus to come in the first century when Romans were ruling, why it was the perfect time for the Messiah to come into this world, because the history is not just random process. We are not just randomly here, but God has foreordained in his knowledge and his wisdom. It was the God's perfect time that he chose to send his son in the fullness of time, as we have read in Galatians chapter 4. It was the fullness of time that he sent his son into this world. So I hope this episode has helped you understanding why it was the fullness of time for the Messiah, for Jesus Christ to be born and to come into this world. Thank you and God bless.